Morning everybody and welcome to the second day of the Regional Transport Committee RLTP hearing being held here in Rotorua. I need to read out the Chair's statement because we're live streaming and I'll follow that with a Chair's introduction for the benefit of any members of the public who are watching the live stream. I remind committee members and the public these hearings are being live streamed and recorded. They will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting and archived for a period of 3 years. Our purpose is to provide greater access to council debate, decision making and encouraging openness and transparency. I also remind all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during the meetings that are subsequently challenged in the court of law and determined to be slanderous. With special regard to the regional land transport hearings, as I said, this is day 2. We have a third day tomorrow in Whakatane. Consultation on the draft RLTP closed on the 24th of March. A total of 133 written submissions were received, with 28 people electing to speak in person to their submission, either as individuals or on behalf of their organisation. There are 3 sessions of hearings taking place in Tauranga, Rotorua and Whakatane this week. These are being heard by a panel consisting of all the members of the Regional Transport Committee. All the hearings will be live streamed. Hearings provide an opportunity for people who have made submissions to speak to the panel about their submissions and to present supporting evidence. Once the hearings are complete, all submissions will be considered by Regional Council staff, who will then make recommendations to the committee on how the submissions should be accommodated in the Regional Land Transport Plan. The committee will meet to deliberate the submissions and recommendations on the 7th of May. The final Regional Land Transport Plan will need to be adopted and then submitted to the New Zealand Transport Agency by the 1st of August 2024 for its consideration for funding and inclusion in the National Land Transport Programme. Before I go into apologies, can I ask my colleague, Councillor White, to lead us in a karakia, please?
Kia ora mo tātou te tiamana, tēnā koe me koutou hoki ngā mema te hoku whakahaere, me koutou ko tai mai nei tēnei rā hei te migata kia poto, karakia poto mo tātou. Just a short prayer for us today. He hongo he koroli ki te atu, he maunga rongo ki te matu o te whenua, he whakaaro pai ki ngā tāngata kuruanga. Hange te atu e ngā kauhau ki roto ki tēnā ki tēnō mātou. Whakatongi o tō wairu tapu hei a whina hei tōtō i mātou whiti whakaaro, whiti kōrero i runga te kaupapa mui a tātou tēnei rā. We would like to put tō mātou kai whakaaro. Amen. Peace and goodwill to all. Amen.
Kia ora. Apologies. I'm holding apologies from His Worship David Moore, the Mayor of BOPRC, Mayor Faylene Tunui and her Councillor Beres Julian from Kawerau District Council, Mayor Tanya Tapsell of the Rotorua Lakes Council.
She's on screen.
Oh, she's here.
She's here.
Okay, and Angus Hodgson and Lyndon Hammond from Kiwi Rail. I will move those apologies. Seconded the Honourable Ken Shirley. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. There are no items not on the agenda. The order of business is as I have described. And are there any declarations of conflict of interest that we need to note for this particular hearing? There being none, we will move on to the actual hearings themselves. Commissioner Selwood, are you operating off the big Los Angeles phone book that I call it?
I am, thank you.
You are, okay, so I'll reference those pages too. So everybody, if Commissioner Selwood and I will be working off page 274, I'll just give everyone a second to go to their page 301 on their laptops. Ready to go? And the first presenter today, we have Roger Lovelace from the Rotorua Access Group. Are you there, Roger?
Yeah, I'm here, yep. Okay.
And we're looking at about, we're reasonably flexible with the time. We're looking at about 10 minutes, but if you get drifted into about 15, no problem whatsoever. But good to have you here on behalf of the sector here in Rotorua.
Yeah. Okay, just a brief introduction to myself and my career. Basically, I've been a professional electric power engineer for my career until I retired way back in 2009. But as part of that career, I worked for various I worked for Hamilton City Council Energy Services Division at one stage, and we looked after the lines network in the middle of there. And one of the things we looked after was all the street lighting. I basically also ended up running a small company called Odyssey Energy Limited, which did a number of the performance measures for Western Bay Plenty District Council when they did their performance-based contract. So I do know a little bit about the way council systems work. And unfortunately, I also now a full-time wheelchair user, and you may have seen my photo on the Rotary Daily Post a little while ago, saying, why on earth haven't we got a footpath up to the new Redwood Park up there? Because I've got family that now live up there, and there are children living up there, and there is no footpath at the top end of, well, the top of Tarawera Road as you come out just before you get there. And that was a concern to me and was raised there. But I've also been raising issues on behalf of the disability community for many years. And that was one of the reasons why I've got involved with this. Unfortunately, under the previous people within the Rotary Lakes Council, we have been putting in submissions and they seem to have been ignored. And I would say there are two reasons for this, and this is reflected in your long-term plan. Basically, when you look at it, the input from Rotary Lakes Council is shameful in the lack of detail and that sort of thing. And I would say this is due basically because of a decision that was made by previous administrations not to levy development contributions for many years. And this is why you can't say Redwood Park subdivision doesn't deserve the footpath. If they had been levied a reasonable development contribution, there would have been plenty of funds to be able to pay for that. And I would say on the back of an envelope calculation that there will be $60 to $100 million hole in Rotary Lakes Council's budget for the works that we were asking for as an access group for quite some time. These are detailed in the submission we put. And I was quite amazed. Well, it confirms my issue when I picked up a copy of the long-term plan consultation document for Rotary Lakes Council, where it states under the development contributions that they're not going to levy any for transport reserves or community infrastructure. I find that quite strange in that they're actually accepting it for the water and Three Waters, but this is the area where funding could come from to remedy some of the issues we've been raising for a number of years. One of the reasons I won't mention the ones that are in the submission, except for the one of Fenton Street. One of my other jobs, things I do at the moment is I'm now the deputy chairperson of the St. Chad's Community Trust, basically, who are in Devon Street, just by Fenton Street there. And Fenton Street, that end there, was the subject of a submission to the long-term plan for Rotorua way back in 2015, and I actually raised it at the annual planning meeting yesterday that nothing was done there. There are no safe crossings, and we look after about 50 or so people with various developmental and other impairments, and they're expected to try and cross that road there. There have been fatalities on the stretch of road I'm talking about, and I think the disabled community, unfortunately, is a collateral damage because there's not enough being done on road safety anyway. So I'm just very disappointed that the transport does not have any indication of how we can pick up those issues that we've been raising for many years. I'd also point out.
Roger.
Is that enough?
Roger, No. Can you just pause for one moment? I'm
Yep.
not going to cut into your time, but I just want to make a few clarifications.
Okay.
As members of the Regional Transport Committee, we have Councillor O'Brien here from Rotorua Lakes Council, and I know her worship is currently overseas, but she's on Zoom and she's listening to all of this and taking note of it.
Yeah.
And we also have Stavros Michael in the room here today too. But this is all very much Rotorua Lakes Council focused. Your comments so far. Can you just sort of revert back to focusing on your submission with regards to the Regional Land Transport Plan for 2024, or?
Well, really, I just really wanted to use it as another way of actually getting through the message that there doesn't appear to be enough resources put into there. And I congratulate the people that put the plan together in that they managed to put something that made a little bit of sense for the Rotorua Lakes Council. But the fact remains that I was looking for some plans for the future that would address some of our concerns, and I saw nothing, basically. So I think I've probably said enough at the moment, and perhaps leave it open if anybody wants to come back, because I'm very concerned that now it even at last got to the point where we've acknowledged that development contributions for transport for development countries are necessary, but I'm very disappointed that they haven't actually pulled in transport as part of that policy. I was looking at the policy from the Ray District Council yesterday for their long-term plan and their development contributions, and every capital project they have there, they list the total cost of it, what they expect to be paid for from development contributions, and the total and the rest. And it's a very organized and very well presented document. We have nothing for these transport infrastructure things there at all.
Well, your comments are noted. You have our assurance on that. Part of the hearing process is that we can't get into a debate with you, but members can ask for points of clarification. So if you're happy, if there are any questions that members would like to pose to you, are you happy to respond?
Yep.
Okay, I open it all up. Is any members at the table or on Zoom who are voting members of the Regional Transport Committee? Any questions or comments? His Worship Mayor, this is the Mayor of Apotiki, Roger, His Worship. Oh, beg your pardon. My apologies, Your Worship.
I'm just wondering what you're using as how you define disability. Can you just clarify that?
I think probably the easiest one is to go to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and that has a definition in there. Let's see what it actually says.
Because it's quite striking that you're coming up with a number of about 24% of New Zealanders with disabilities.
Yeah, well, that is a recognised figure that has come through. It obviously that takes the whole range of disabilities, whether it's sensory impairments and things like that. I happen to be a wheelchair user and depend on the footpaths and things like that. Another issue I've raised at times is the lack of tactile pavers, which you'll know is a little yellow, usually yellow, things that guide people with vision impairments and things like that. They're very ad hoc around Rotorua. And I think as far as wheelchairs concerned, I think it's about sort of 2 or 3% or something like that. Then we have walkers and that sort of thing. But yeah, that is fairly wide ranging, the 25%. Yeah, I would agree with you there. But it's still a significant number of people are affected. The other issue too, of course, is we're at the forefront of trying to move people away from cars. I don't have a driving license or access to my own vehicle I can drive, so I depend on the buses and things like that. So if we want to get people out of their cars, we've got to put some money into the infrastructure to encourage them to do it. It grieves me to see some of the so-called bus stops around Rotorua and how on earth the regional council can improve the bus service when they haven't got the infrastructure suitable for taking the buses down. There are a number of bus stops and things like that which basically I cannot use because they are not fit for purpose. And I see I've complained about this to the council and nothing has been done about it.
Well, irrespective of the hearing today, you have RLC politicians here and officers and Her Worships listening by Zoom. So your comments aren't falling on deaf ears, Roger. So
And they are well made.
they are indeed.
Pretty clear.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any final comments, Roger?
No, I just congratulate the people that did manage to get something from the Rotorua Lakes Council to make a little bit of sense for the land transport plan. I really commend the other things there, and really it was good to see particularly Western Bay of Plenty District Council having quite a lot of input there. And I say I have a lot of work to, a lot of faith with the way they put their long-term last asset management plan for the roading. And okay, that contract has now come to an end, but it really was nice to hear that they're doing that, because what we did there was basically decided we couldn't bring the infrastructure up to standard within a couple of years, but it was stretched out over a long period of time. And this is what I was expecting to see for this long term, this Rotorua in the transport plan carrying forward into their long-term plan, but it's obviously not the case at the moment. So I'll be making comments to their long-term plan on that basis.
Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for your time, and thanks
thank you for being with us, and we appreciate you giving up your time today to put in a submission.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Have a good day, Roger. Thank you so much. Your Worship, are you there?
Yes, she was.
There she is. Yeah. Is it Konnichiwa, Your Worship? Or?
Ohayou gozaimasu for the morning.
Oh.
Very early morning, so good morning all.
Share with us, what time are you up this morning?
About 6 a.m, so it's not too bad.
Okay. We're just about to lead into the Rotorua Lakes Council's submission. Commissioner Selwood, you and I are operating off page 427. And if everyone else can refer to page 454 on their computers. So you wanted to make some opening comments, Your Worship, so the floor is yours. I'm pretty generous with the time, and it's of particular interest to all of us, the Rotorua Lakes submission. So please, over to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, and my apologies that I'm not there in person to join you for the hearing, but I am going to join General Manager of Infrastructure, Stavros Michael, who is there in the room. So I think I'll just cover off the key points in the Rotorua Lakes Council submission, but if you do have any questions, he is also available to assist. So first of all, thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to provide feedback on the Regional Land Transport Plan. We're very aware of the critical importance that the balanced and effective land transport network plays in serving the needs of the community, so thank you for your work. We do support the stated objectives to address the region's transportation needs, and our transport system results from the need to help our community's broader well-being. So Rotorua at the moment, our current population and anticipated household and economic growth do require a system that is capable of serving the diverse needs of our community. We need to provide realistic choices of travel and minimise any environmental impacts, and support a range of current and new economic activities, of which we're very excited to have a few coming on board shortly. So Rotorua is a significant part of this region, both in population, land coverage, economic activity. But I'd like to just highlight the Rotorua Lakes Council's concerns about the proposed draft allocation of funds in the plan that creates, in our view, non-equitable outcomes in project funding allocation between the key centres of the Bay of Plenty region. So, naturally, Rotorua would like to see more equitable distribution. And while we acknowledge the significant growth excuse me, and development in Tauranga, we strongly urge for a more balanced approach that allocates resources across all of the region. So the Regional Land Transport Plan should reflect the diverse needs of all communities, including Rotorua, which is really the key point of this submission. Rotorua, because of our geographic location, we rely heavily on the ability of state highways to perform in line with their designation, whether it's our housing goals, our visitor economy, commercial industrial outputs, we're reliant on those highways. So I do want to remind the committee members that Rotorua Lakes Council agreed back in 2016 to lift the Rotorua Eastern Arterial designation. So that was established back in 1960s, but remained dormant only on the basis that the Connect to Rotorua program of works had been agreed with our partners and would be given effect. So the agreed program anticipated did stage improvements to the key state highway corridors of our district. So there was a little disappointment to note in the draft plan that those improvements remain marginalised and uncertain. So I want to express my council's strong view that the committee should include, and we request, the following projects in the Regional Land Transport Plan. I have 5 that I'll just quickly name. Number 1, certainty of funding for the State Highway 30A revocation, as has already been agreed with NZTA to support our inner city revitalisation. Number 2, give effect to the improvement options identified on the intersection of State Highway 5 and State Highway 30 and in the vicinity of Waipa interface. Number 3, which is where we will have economic development shortly. Number 3, identify and map the required improvements on the State Highway corridor from the Hemo roundabout to Tingai Road. And number 4, progress stage 3 of the Tingai State Highway 30 corridor, with priority being the safety improvements required by our airport and our Eastgate industrial development, another economic development opportunity. And finally, number 5, progress the State Highway 4 laning from Fairy Springs to the Ngongotaha roundabout. Our community has given us strong feedback on these areas. We see it every day, the need for requiring this development. And so that is our request in the submission, that we see the necessary equitable allocation of funding. So thank you to the committee for receiving our submission, and Stavros or myself will respond to any questions that.
Your Worship, it's critically important that we capture these priorities of yours. Can you just list them again, the 5 of them? Just the staff are frantically trying to type as you speak, so it's important that we capture them. So just go through them again. And I'm also mindful of the same list. Oh, they're in the paper. I beg your pardon. Okay, because they come up again this afternoon when we have Rotorua NZ and the Chamber of Commerce. I think they're near identical. So
yes, I've just added them into the chat as well for anyone who wants to see.
Okay. So are you staying with us now, Your Worship, or have you got to?
Apologies, I will start after my submission.
Okay, all good, all good. So, Stavros, are you speaking to the main body of the submission, or?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Good morning.
And we're flexible with the time,
Thank you.
because it's pretty important that we hear Rotorua Lakes Council's perspective on all of this.
Thank you. Look, thank you, Chair and members. I think the main key points have been made by my, the Worship, the Mayor of Rotorua Lakes Council. What I wanted to stress again, and I hope we all share that essence of our submission, is that Rotorua's location is such that our economy, our visitor economy, our forestry economy, our residential house building and so on, rely heavily on 2 key corridor accesses, south to north from Waipa towards Hamilton, and south to east. To that effect, as Her Worship the Mayor said, Rotorua has agreed with its partners since 2016 to lift the RA designation and put emphasis on a gradual and systematic but persistent reinforcement of those 2 corridors to become fit for purpose as state highways. I think we need to recognize, and to recognize heavily, especially with our forestry and commercial activities is a clear, distinguished option between efficiency of corridors and accessibility. We believe that the main state highway corridors have to be as efficient as possible to enable the conduct of industrial, commercial, freight business, free of obstructions, and move as efficiently as possible to go to the destinations. Within the city itself, accessibility is a higher priority than efficiency of transport. And obviously, accessibility can be conducted through walking, cycling, public transport, private vehicle. But obviously, the efficiency of getting from point A to point B is less important than actually accessibility. And we think within this regional land transport program, we note that we have agreed with our partners since 2016 to gradually give effect to a systematic and reliable improvement on the two freight and heavy traffic corridors of the state highways is now beginning to slip behind. We see stage 1 and stage 2 of State Highway 30, but we see stage 3 very, very far in the horizon. And that impedes our potential economic realization development on the side of the State Highway corridor. We see State Highway 30A relocation has been designed and ready to go since 2018, actually. And of course, that's because it continues to act as a main conduit connecting west and east. It really dissects our central business district, from our aspirations to have a vibrant and residential and recreational activity in the city. Now, we would like to see that progressing because it's 5 years since that design has been concluded and agreed. But in order to give effect to that accessibility priority, then obviously other segments of the state highway corridors, especially from Hino to Tinai and through Sala, needs to be looked very closely because we cannot incentivize heavy traffic to bypass the city if we do not have viable alternative routes for this heavy traffic. Because if we do that, we compromise our economic activity. So there is a sense of our submission here, and I think there are a few words in detail in our submission, but the essence of our submission is actually to recognize that Rotorua expects to see ongoing, reliable, and systematic investment on our state highway, two state highway corridors, east and west and north, sorry. We expect to see those corridors to be prepared, to the point where they are fit for the purpose of conveying heavy and industrial and heavy numbers of traffic. And so it can allow us to operate within the urban segment of the city to navigate between the challenging concerns of accessibility, safety, environmental aspects, the revitalization of the city, and so on. So the 5 key priorities Worship outlined are remaining our objectives here. And we also expect to see that the limited resources that we recognize exist there, they will continue to be dedicated in a fair and balanced way across the whole region. So I'll leave it at that, but happy to take any questions you may have on that. Thank you.
So, Stavros, of the 5 key focus areas,
Yep.
I know they're all vitally important for Rotorua. Do you have a priority list of those 5? If we're going to start pushing hard further down the chain going forward, are there any? Can you give those to us today, or would you like to get back to us?
Yeah, I would, and I don't think I'll be intentional with my elected members if I say the following in terms of priorities. Okay. Priority number 1 would be to give effect to the improvements we have identified in the vicinity of Waipa and Peka blocks that are with 5 and start with 30, because the mill over there is about to double its capacity, and obviously heavy vehicles coming in and out of the block will be at risk. Peka block is in the process of being developed, and that will put further strain into the safety and efficiency of heavy vehicles. So that's one. The second one would like to see an ongoing continuation of progression of State Highway 30 from, I know very soon we'll finish stage 2 up to Ofata, just beyond Ofata. But we would like to see stage 3 of State Highway 30 go all the way to the airport. Because if you look at residential and commercial development opportunities on either side of it are ripe, for achievement.
Yeah.
And the fact that stage 2 seems to be a stopping point, but we don't see a horizon for another 20 years for stage 3, it just becomes detrimental to our city. I would say stage 3, priority 3 should be to identify map improvements, from the Himo roundabout all the way to Tinai Road, before we actually get the State Highway A revocation. Because the revocation is no use to us unless we are able to regulate heavy traffic flows through the city. And if we cannot regulate effectively the traffic flows by suggesting alternative routes, it's just pointless. So I would say the mapping of improvements between the Himo roundabout and the Tinai Road is number 3 in our priorities. Number 4 will be the State Highway 30 revocation, and number 5 with the 4 laning from Ferry Springs to Nugodaha roundabout. Thank you.
That's of great help, Stavros. Your Worship, did you want to comment further?
Thank you. Just to support the statements made by my General Manager of Infrastructure, and we receive a lot of feedback from our community around these safety concerns. As our population continues to grow and as these economic developments come on board, it's going to become even more urgent. So I think, as decision makers, we do have a moral obligation to make sure that we are protecting not only our residents, but also our business owners as well. So, when you think about the heavy freight that will be going back and forth, but also the recreational opportunities that we have in places like Waipa, with that mountain bike park being used incredibly well. And so, those are the foundational basis of the request of these priority areas.
Thank you. I'll open it up to questions from the panel. The Honourable Ken Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question that probably David Spears from NZTA could help us with most, but I noticed that most of these projects are state highway projects, and it comes back to the importance of the integration between the Regional Land Transport Plan and the National Land Transport Plan. And for example, the priority 1 indicate on State Highway 5 and 30 Waipa intersection. It's a question of where does that sit in the National Land Transport Plan, because we want to be linked up with that and setting our regional priorities, obviously. And the other one was the completion of State Highway 5 4-laning Ferry Springs to Nongataha roundabout. Perhaps, David, could you give us some indication of just where they sit on the priorities at the moment under the National Land Transport Plan? Because I know that we have input as a Regional Land Transport Plan to influence those priorities.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're in the awkward position as we progress with these hearings that we don't yet have a state highway improvement plan publicly available. And from a state highway point of view, very clearly that's the guiding document for us. That's the interpretation of the board as to what does the government policy statement mean for state highway investment. So in the absence of that, I can't give you, unfortunately, any commentary except to say that we at a staff level and executive level have been well aware of those 5 priorities for quite some time, and as Stavros will confirm, we've had some good robust conversations about what investment in those 5 priorities might look like. So they were all put forward for inclusion in the State Highway Improvement Plan, and I would say the case that's been made today for those was well reflected in the process of putting those forward into the State Highway Improvement Plan. How they will fall out in the State Highway Improvement Plan, I can't tell you. Ironically, we're expecting the State Highway Improvement Plan any day, but I quite honestly have no insight into what has or hasn't made it through that process. It's been kept very, very close by the board and minister. So,
Commissioner Selwood.
Thank you, Chair. I've just sort of wanted to check on our process. I'm very sympathetic to the submission that has been made by Rotorua District Council and understand the importance of these projects. But I'm wondering how in the process Rotorua Council would have been represented on the advisory group, roading advisory group, is it, that formulated the list. And that was a kind of a weightings process, scoring against, the objectives of the plan. So I'm just wondering, and perhaps Stavros, you may be able to answer this. What is it in that process that resulted in these projects, I guess, being lower ranked than you would have liked to have seen?
Well, there are two aspects, there too is David Spears indicated just a couple of minutes earlier, Rotorua Council officers and NZTA staff, including other partners, have been working on those business cases for the 5 priorities we have identified. Those priorities have been embedded into the regional scoring process. But of course, at the end of the day, what my mayor suggested earlier is that when you're weighing up levels of degrees of importance and you're assigning that to numbers of, to vehicle traffic numbers and population numbers, Rotorua comes second to the center of Tauranga and Western Bay, simply by weight of population and by weight of traffic demand onto the perspective there too. So none of what we've said has not been discussed at the advisory group or through the partners, but at a scoring level, obviously the major population centers appear to attract a higher weighting grading.
His Worship Mayor Luca.
Yeah, well, I actually was putting my finger on the same thing that the Commissioner mentioned, and I wonder how our process operated, that it resulted in this lack of equity or fairness, whatever that really means in the context of the development of this plan, because we use this multivariate or multi-criteria analysis in which fairness and equity don't rank as a criterion. So my question is along similar lines, but if we're now talking about giving some weighting to this thing we call fairness, what does that really mean? Does it mean that we index everything according to population distribution or some other numerical parameter, or how would it work? So that, I guess, is a thing that once the hearing is finished, we will have to deliberate on. But it was, I guess, in this particular instance, it gets down to where the process failed you, if that's the right thing to say, and we need to sort it out. So thank you for. I mean, there was a submission yesterday from Glenn Grother about, it really pointed out the stark differences in resource allocation across the region. And this is a thing I worry about, not just for the regional land transport plan, but when it comes to forming entities in the water space, for example, where the big centres will act like a centre of gravity and attract everything towards them. And we all understand that through State Highway 29 is a major corridor that we all get benefit from as well. It's not like we don't also use it, at the outer reaches of the district, everybody that eventually drives through there, possibly quite often. So thank you for your submission, and we're all wondering about this.
Chair, I suspect that, sorry for interrupting, but I just further to the comments, I suspect that these projects would have weighted or scored quite well in terms of economic development and road safety, but perhaps not so strong on the sustainability, enabling housing objectives. And so that because they weren't weighted right across the spectrum of criteria, they probably didn't rank as strongly as we might have thought they would. So that possibly is the issue here. I think in our deliberations, it's worthwhile us considering those issues.
Well, I mean, looking at the way things went from my perspective, is that there is this RAG group which really assesses these 6 criteria here, and someone from council gets appointed to the group, and somehow some numbers are thrown around. So at the end of the day, elected members have relatively little to say on it. It sort of makes its way through the council bureaucracy and ends up in this table. And at the end of the day, there's also an element, I guess, of negotiation that goes on somewhere along the line. You know, why should you get the resources and we not? That type of level of interaction seemed to be missing in the paper. I guess we will need to think about this after these hearings and see what the path forward is.
Because my own personal perception was that it was arm's length, technical advisory group. It was arm's length, it was transparent, it was a substantial group of individuals, like there were 2 officers from each of the TLAs. Granted, it was chaired by one of our senior transport planners just within the regional council, but it was a substantial group with 2 representatives and 2 officers, knowledgeable officers from each of the TLAs. You know,
there's no perfect
I
way.
know.
I've done many of these in another context, and at the end of the day, there's an element of arbitrariness in all of them, because there's criteria and weighting and all of this. How do you weight each of those criteria? But anyway.
Nikki?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, to my knowledge, those projects were not actually in the list that we were considering as a RAG. Now, that might be because they were in, well, they would have had to have been put forward in the draft State Highway Improvement Programme. So if they weren't in the improvement programme, then they wouldn't be considered by the RAG.
Right, prioritisation is a glitch. Big one. Okay.
That's actually huge.
That's a big glitch.
That's a revelation.
Yeah.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, I support our worship, Mayor Tapsell and Mr. Michael's comments here today. What Ms. Carling has said obviously needs to follow up on us, and I assure you we will be doing that straight away after this meeting. Could I just say on behalf of the Rotorua people, you're welcome. And where I say you're welcome, because I presume at some stage the people of Rotorua are going to get a big thank you card for all the work that we did over COVID, where the buses were coming through other towns. I'm not going to mention those towns. Maybe places like Hamilton and Tauranga don't have hotels, but that's okay. We were more than happy to put up our hand during a national crisis and emergency. Now look at also what we've been undertaking with homelessness from around the central North Island. Now, we don't ask for a lot. What we've been asking for, we've probably been asking for the best part of 20 odd years. And the reason for that is it's the same highways that we're asking about all the time. We don't have brand new overheads. We don't have brand new bridges like some towns. It's essentially the same highways. Those are the heartbeat, the arterial heartbeats of this town and township and how we're going to develop. So I would ask, one of the submitters yesterday said, I hope that we're going to be judging on population and growth and not politics. Well, could I just turn that around and say, well, as far as population and growth, we want to grow. We want the best roads for our population. We want to be able to service housing and development and investment growth. And we've been hamstrung. So I would ask people around this table and also those watching, I often hear on these committees about what's needed. It's Tauranga to Port, Tauranga to Port, Tauranga to Port. But when it comes to paying for things, it's regional, it's regional, it's regional. We don't ask for a lot, but what we are asking for is support and help to grow this town so we can play a stronger part in the region. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Honourable Ken Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. I've just been reflecting on the gravity of the statement that our senior transport planner just advised us in terms of the misjunction of process. And process is so important in this sort of thing of setting priorities. And Mayor Luca was, setting the criteria. But from what I heard, and I think as a committee we're going to have to reflect on this and think quite deeply, was there a failure in participation through the RAG, is it? In fact, where, from what I heard, some of these key priority projects, the 5 that are listed, did not receive due consideration in the priority setting. Is that the correct understanding? That's hugely significant if that is the case. If we're going to have a robust system with integrity and fairness and equity through the region, it's most important that that process evaluates all the projects on a truly comparative priority basis. That's what's worrying me.
Nikki, then his worship Mayor Luca. Nikki.
I wasn't adding.
Oh, weren't you? Oh,
No,
I thought you were nodding. I beg your pardon. His worship Mayor Luca.
Well, just sort of expand, I mean, you might want to cut this off because it's not really questions of clarity, but I mean, when I saw this table and I saw the virtual absence of Rotorua here, I mean, I haven't been in this process before. This was all sort of a learning experience for me. So I saw the absence of Rotorua. I just thought, well, Rotorua's not asking for anything. Well, I don't know. I mean, I didn't know what conclusion to come to. So, I mean, the alarm bell probably should have been, maybe I should have raised it a little earlier on, but it just, that's the conclusion I came to. Obviously wrong.
Stavros, any further comments?
No, just as I said, I'm a bit surprised because my colleague and partner David Spears just said earlier a few minutes ago that all these projects are on the ship on the State Highway Improvement program, but obviously we don't know the outcome of that yet. So how come proposals on a State Highway Improvement program don't find themselves evaluated in the regional land transport program? It's just beyond me. I'm not sure how that works. So it just seems to be an inconsistency there too. But again, I'm going to worship Mayor Luca comments. Rotorua continues to focus attention on two separate things. State highways serve Rotorua are a pivotal component of the highway. We expect the state highways to come to a fit state for their function to serve our commercial, industrial movement. We're not asking for anything inside Rotorua other than the revocation of State Highway 38, which basically is a transfer of liability in the future. It's not an asset because road assets are not convertible. We just have to carry the liability for the in perpetuity. So we expect a SHIP program to be reflected in the regional land transport, our priority programs.
So can I just ask, maybe I haven't got it wrong and I don't know enough, but so because most of your asks are state highway, then they would have been outside of this anyway? Is that what you're saying?
Well, sorry.
No, yeah, maybe.
Hold on, just David, some points of clarification.
Yeah, perhaps just for clarification. So there are a lot of state highway projects that are in this process. So it's not a given that because it would have been considered through the SHIP process that it isn't in this process. What I know is those projects were known about as we went into the State Highway Improvement Plan process. But remember, the State Highway Improvement Plan is a reflection of the GPS. And so, as I said earlier, we're in the unfortunate situation where we've had a brand new GPS. We're now going to get a brand new State Highway Improvement Plan in very quick succession. And the GPS has changed the goalposts significantly in terms of what is and isn't a priority for the government. So when they've been considered or known about as we moved into the SHIP process, whether they're in the SHIP or not, I simply don't know at the moment, and that will be a reflection of what comes through the GPS process. Just a reminder again, the Regional Transport Committee can come to a conclusion that your regional transport plan is different from what from the priorities in the GPS. So you only have to be consistent with, you don't have to give effect to the GPS. The State Highway Improvement Plan has to give effect to the GPS. So you can propose things that are maybe slightly inconsistent with, or not inconsistent with, but are not as strongly reflective of the priorities in the GPS because of your regional nuance, and they may or may not get funded. So just want to be really clear that all of those 5 priorities are not, I didn't say that in the SHIP. They may not be. And I don't know until we get it.
But as I said, in defence of the Regional Transport Committee, you know, what gave me a level of comfort was the technical advisory group was transparent and arm's length and brought down recommendations to the Regional Transport Committee, which was the priority list. And that gave me personally a high level of comfort. But I think the determining meeting is going to be on the 7th of May when the whole Regional Transport Committee sits around to deliberate the submissions and the recommendations. So I think there's going to be a very interesting discussion take place there. Any further comments? Honourable Ken Shirley? No? His Worship Mayor Luca? No. Councillor O'Brien? And I can assure you there were no politics in it.
Oh, no, sorry.
No, I can assure you there were no politics in it, you know. We're all rooting for the Bay of Plenty at the end of the day, you know. Stavros, some final comments?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Your Worship, final comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Can I thank everyone for taking on board and hearing our submissions and the key points in there. I think it has raised a valuable point for us all to consider around equity, fairness, but actually the fact that this is a regional transport committee. So although we're here presenting the Rotorua Lakes Council submission, I do also have sympathy for all of our councils, especially our smaller ones across the region, who will be looking towards this and seeing, well, what value does this bring me? And of course, the communities that we represent that will also be asking, what value does this bring me? So as we continue to grow as a region, I hope that we're able to do so in a way that sees growth and investment across all of it. So thank you very much for your time this morning.
And Your Worship, can I say in support of the comments that His Worship Mayor Luca made, there were some very positive statements made and concerns expressed on behalf of Rotorua by Bay of Plenty presenters yesterday as part of the hearing. So that went down well. Okay, we need to move on, everybody, but Your Worship, travel safely and send our best wishes to those travelling with you. So thank you for being with us. So we might just adjourn. I think we're going to adjourn, everybody, because we have one presenter, Lani Kirioka, who's no longer available, and we're trying to find John Henry, who is coming in by Zoom. So we're just going to pause. Andrew, did you hear all that previous discussion?
Yes,
I
I
don't
did.
expect you to comment. Oh, no, not you, the other Andrew. Andrew Williams. I know you can't comment, it's not appropriate, but did you hear all that conversation?
I did, and we're beavering away in the background, Councillor. With
okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, we're just going to adjourn for 10 minutes, so just talk amongst yourselves. The live stream's on the net. Hold on, just don't say anything, just check the live stream. Welcome back, everybody. Commissioner. Carol, are you there? Commissioner Selwood, you and I are on page 661. Everyone else is on 688. Carol, are you there? She was there a minute ago.
She was.
Carol, can you hear us? Phone number here.
Sophie, can you please give her a call?
021. Oh, you got the phone number?
Yeah.
Not 661.
It's got no microphone. She can hear you when you talk.
Carol, can you hear us? Right. You want to present tomorrow in Whakatane by Zoom? Sort of system out.
Makes sense. Because we don't exactly have lots.
No.
Quite excited by finishing everything.
Oh, no. No, it's not with her.
I've had some battle scars.
Carol, can you hear us? No. We suggest she presents tomorrow in Whakatane.
Okay, can you arrange that, Kate?
Just
Message
yeah,
Carol.
add her to the list. What are we doing now, Amanda?
Waiting to hear back from us, and he's not due for another half an hour, but I asked him if he'd like to present early, cancelled, and technical issues.
Number of technical issues. Power, she dropped out.
I suggest you adjourn until this chat comes up, because it's only him and the chamber left.
Would the chamber and Rotarians who'd like to come earlier?
We'll contact them.
Are we being live streamed?
Yes, so announce an adjournment.
We will adjourn everybody for another quarter of an hour. And we'll just turn the live stream
I
off.
would say probably that.
You want me to shoot over?
Gonna start recording now again, Jenny, okay?
Yeah, I'm gonna finish this.
Can you hear us, Carol? Can you hear us, Carol? Can you hear us?
I know all of those ones.
Carol, can you hear us?
False alarm.
Can you see us?
We can see her now, but she's got no microphone.
Can you give her a ring? Sorry. Sorry, everyone. It's the dog.
Sorry.
No,
It's your fault, Lauren.
No, it's not. It's just.
Carol, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's not your problem. We've got technical issues, but no, it's good to have you with us. Commissioner, you and I are on page 661. Everyone else is on 688. Carol, good to have you with us. I know it's very much a Tauranga focused submission. You'll be pleased to know that there's a number of Tauranga politicians that are watching this at this present moment, so it won't be falling on deaf ears. So about 10 minutes. We give you about 10 minutes.
Sure.
We don't get into a debate with you, but some of the members may have points of clarification they'd like to put to you about what you're suggesting and proposing. So over to you.
Thank you. Well, kia ora, everyone. My name's Carol Jenkin. I just want to start with a brief intro. I'm not a transport expert by any means. This is, I have a fundamental interest in climate change and trying to spark debates about that in any forum that will let me. And so I'm interested in transport because it's our second biggest source of emissions, basically, behind intensive agriculture. Can you hear me still? Sorry.
Yes, very loud and clear.
Cool. So I didn't read every last second of the draft plan. It's huge. And I have a day job and various other things I need to do, so I didn't get into the minutiae of it. But I did like the fact that the key priority one of the key priorities is transitioning to sustainable transport systems to minimise environmental impacts. And I think that's 100% valid. I just feel that it comes across a little bit mealy-mouthed in the face of the state of the crisis that we're in right now. And I think if we're doing a plan for 10 years, that we could harden up that language a little bit and just really go for gold. We very rarely, whether the priorities will actually achieve that is a whole nother thing. But I think sometimes transitioning is a word that gets used a lot, and it comes across sometimes as a bit of greenwashing, really, as ticking boxes and stuff. But anyway, the plan does have some proposals in it. I think, for example, it needs to be the number one priority that there's a target, the target of reducing carbon emissions by road of 41%. I think that's a good target. That feels like a good solid target to me. We know that climate devastation impacts every living system. And this is basically the last decade. All the scientists are saying this is the last decade we've got to actually try and reverse the juggernaut a little bit and reduce those impacts. And I just think the plans and targets could be a bit stronger. So, for example, in September 2020, I was just looking at the costs of what I'm arguing for basically is an increasing emphasis on public transport and a decreasing emphasis quite quickly on the construction of roads. So I did a little bit of research on the costs of roads versus rail. It's not foolproof, but it's just what I cobbled together for today. So the Bay Fair to Bay Park State Highway 2 upgrade, which was 2 kilometres, cost more than 70 million per kilometre. And RNZ said in August last year that Transmission Gully, which is 27 kilometres, cost 1.25 billion, which equates to 46 million per kilometre. The public transport pollution from public transport is far less than from vehicles and buses and trains emit 80% less carbon than cars. In the plan, the draft plan, you've got Takitimu Northern Link estimated costs are almost 700 million. That's starting to happen at the bottom of my road, funnily enough, because I live just off State Highway 2 in Whakamarama. And then you've got versus public transport, a business case for public transport at 1.1 million and a one trial of a park and ride from Papamoa. I would really like to see some park and ride options looked at from the north heading down State Highway 2 into Tauranga,
because I think what generally happens is when you increase the size of the roading capacity, you actually increase the number of cars using the road. It isn't just about making the journey easier for the existing car users. What always happens is the overall volume of cars goes up, and that isn't going to help us achieve a 41% reduction in carbon emissions. So it's just joining the dots, you know, sort of going full circle, really. You have got 53.9 million set aside for improvements in public transport, but that's across the whole region. And it may well be on me for not reading the minutiae, but I didn't work out exactly what that would cover. So please feel free to put me in my place for that one. But it doesn't seem like a huge amount of money invested across the region for public transport. I think one of the things I'd like to really look at is, or for you guys to look at with all your experts, is looking at replicating Tahuya. So I know it's in the news at the minute because National were never a big fan, and they do want to call out the subsidies and the cost per passenger and all the rest of it. But Tahuya cost about 69 million to set up, and the running costs are about 6 million a year. So that is a subsidised journey, but it does take thousands of people out of cars for that trip. And the subsidy per person per kilometre for that is 75 cents, which is actually cheaper than the Metro Rail, the existing Metro Rail in Auckland. But then you look at the Waikato Expressway, which I accept does lots of people use it, but that's at a cost. That was at a cost of 2.4 billion. Which means that each kilometre of that costs 23.5 million. One of the other targets we've got is reducing the road toll. And I feel that the more we put into buses and public transport, that will automatically have an impact on the more people we can get out of cars and into mass public transport, the better for the environment, the better for human health. I just feel that more trains equals less cars and less flights. I know it's a land transport plan, but flying is a big source of emissions as well. And that's really all I had to say. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Carol. You'll be pleased to know that the chairman of our Public Transport Committee has listened to your submission. So, as I say, you've got quite an audience today. So any questions from around the table? Is Worship Mayor Luca the mayor of
I'm just wondering where you got your numbers from for the Bay Park to Bay Fair at 70, I think you said
I did.
$70 million per kilometre. Is that right?
Yeah. So that was from September 2020. I'd have to just go back through my searches this morning. It may well have been an article by RNZ, because a couple of my other figures were from them. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I didn't actually write down where I got that figure from, but that's quite old anyway. That was 2020.
It is recognised as the most expensive piece of road investment in New Zealand's history on a kilometre basis.
Yeah,
that was the Honourable Ken Shirley, Carol. Commissioner Selwood.
Thank you, Chair. And I would note that it was an extremely complex intersection and grade separation kind of project. So it's a little bit harsh to rate it just on a per kilometre basis. But I accept your fundamental premise, Carol, that we need to be investing in public transport services. And I guess I just wanted to give you some comfort that, in fact, some of the priority projects proposed in the listing are exactly that. So Cameron Road Stage 2 is primarily predicated on enabling bus services, provision of bus services, walking and cycling along that Cameron Road corridor to extend the existing investment that was made in Cameron Road Stage 1. And that is all predicated on the intent to enable greater intensification along that Cameron Road corridor and less dependence on cars and more ability to be able to live, work, play, catch a bus, walk, cycle to all of the service destinations that are along Cameron Road. And if you extend your thinking a little bit further out to the State Highway 29 package of works, which were prioritised in the RLTP, that is a roading project in significance because it enables State Highway 29 as an interregional corridor and connection to and from the port and the Waikato and through to Auckland. But it is equally a public transport initiative in that the existing State Highway 29 corridor as we know it today will become a local road and will enable primarily public transport, but also walking and cycling connections. That will enable 25,000 or up to 25 to 30,000 homes in the Tauriko area where there is already significant employment and growth in employment expected. So we can potentially create or provide for much of the future growth of Tauranga City in a live, work, learn, play kind of environment in Tauriko, but then with very strong public transport connections via State Highway 29 Cameron Road to the CBD and indeed across the bridge to the Mount. And along that entire corridor, there's 70% of the employment in CBD. So very much in our thinking from a TCC perspective is a shift away from car dependence to a greater intensification across the city, but in particular along the Cameron Road corridor. And there where we are doing greenfields development, as in Tauriko, it is in a live, work, play environment with public transport connectivity. So, you know, those are significant investments in projects. We've already invested hundreds of millions of dollars or $100 million plus in Cameron Road stage 1, for it's primarily a public transport, walking and cycling, urban intensification project. So there is significant investment, both delivered and planned. And I hope that gives you some confidence that we are indeed focused on doing what we can in a balanced way that provides for a kind of economic regional connectivity on the one hand, but intensification and public transport on the other.
Yeah.
Any final comments, Carol?
No, I think if that thinking that Mr. Selwood was just describing could be transferred out to north of Tauranga, that would be great. So Omakoroa is the next big settlement just north of where I live. And it's planned to intensify to about 12,000 people, I think, and it's already well on the way. And both Omakoroa and the road where I live, we have the train line from the port that runs direct. It runs at the bottom of my garden. So I see the trains passing every day, some of which are fully empty, some of which clearly have capacity on them. And it's difficult to hear arguments where investing more in looking at creating passenger opportunities on that train line are cast aside because they're seen as too expensive. But actually, that for me would be a sensible option to properly consider, because the traffic expansion from Omakoroa into the north of Tauranga is already huge, and it's just going to get worse. And so far, we've decided we're going to prioritise building a new highway and a bridge in the Takitimu, which is okay. But I think the bus services are pretty dire along the road. I work shift work, so I'm not able to catch a bus most of the time anyway, because the service is quite minimal, and it won't get me into a night shift in the hospital. The irony for me is that I see the trains passing at the bottom of my garden, and I know there's a station at the bottom of my road, and there certainly was a station, and there's lots of passing places. So I think it's a missed opportunity not to look at trying to replicate something along the lines of Tahuya on that line as well, because just from observation, it looks like there's quite a bit of capacity.
Any final comments from around the table? Is Worship Mayor Luca? Yeah, well, thanks, Carol. Anyway, I completely understand where you're coming from. I feel it. We're in a difficult spot. We're a very small country. Well, got a lot of land for the number of people. Population density is relatively low. And that makes things very, very difficult. I think everybody around the table agrees that we've got to reduce our dependence on the car, but New Zealand is having a love affair with the car, and we're going to require a bit of a cultural shift. I keep saying that the average New Zealander would rather divorce their partner than divorce their car. And so I think getting people out of cars, public transport's got to be frequent, it's got to be efficient, and there's got to be like connections. There's no point getting from Whakatane to Papamoa. If once you get to Papamoa, you can't do anything. It's a complicated problem, but we thank you for your submission.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, and thank you for taking the time to put in a submission, and apologies again for the difficulties we had connecting at the start. So have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Jeremy, welcome.
Yes, good morning, everybody. How are we?
We're good. Commissioner, you and I are on page 651. Everyone else is on page 678. So, Jeremy, about 10 minutes, quarter of an hour. And as you just heard with Carol there, we have some time for questions from panel members. So, floor is yours.
Well, I absolutely intend to leave time for questions, but it sounds like you're covering a lot of the same ground that I'm going to be talking about. This proposal from me is all about the Tauranga tram, which is a step away from using the railway tracks for actual rail cars, but instead installing light rail. So we'll quickly move on to page 2. Because Tauranga has this unique opportunity to leverage its geography and existing infrastructure to implement a cost-effective and environmentally conscious public transportation solution using readily available existing technology. I think we're all very much across the different problems.
Jeremy,
yes?
just pause for 1 minute. We've all been circulated your presentation.
Yep.
With the Tauranga tram. So if you want to refer to specific pages, feel free. So we've all had that placed in front of us at the table. So we've got your presentation, the colourful one.
My greatest thanks to Amanda for making that available to all of you.
Yeah, back to you.
So I'm moving on to page 3, which is simply outlining the problems as we all know them to exist in Tauranga in regards to congestion, mobility, emissions, and costs. The big thing with this particular proposal, which I hope will stand apart from some of the others you might hear, is that there is an opportunity here to massively cut costs while implementing the tram. And that comes down to Tauranga's remarkable advantage in regards to the railway lines that it currently already has. And listening to those other submissions, it's clear that it's not lost on the public about what an advantage they possibly could be. So moving on to page 5, the issue that Auckland and Wellington had with their tram proposals was most of the cost was around actually having to procure the land, build the railway lines, and then both of those proposals were also going to have overhead wires running the entire length of the routes. The advantage, of course, that Tauranga, Mount Maunganui, Papamoa have is that the railway lines run straight through the centre of town, all the way out to Mount Maunganui, and then all the way along the length of Papamoa. So moving on to page 6, what I'm proposing is to leverage the technology that already exists to use what's called autonomous mobility. And if anybody has any questions at this point, you're welcome to jump in. This is existing technology. This isn't new technology that we're waiting for. This isn't a new kind of electric car. This isn't anything like that. This is already running in hundreds of trams around the world. The closest of which to us is actually in Australia, in Newcastle. And instead of having overhead wires or a third rail to power the tram along the length of the route, what happens is the tram pulls up at a stop and then using a pantograph charges the tram to get it to its next stop. And it does that using supercapacitors, which are similar to batteries, but can charge very, very quickly. So basically the tram can charge itself in about 10 seconds, which is plenty of time for passengers to disembark and re-embark before traveling to the next stop. In fact, the tram can travel for anywhere between 3 and 5 kilometers on that single 10-second charge. So there's certainly no risk of it running out of juice. But one of the things that you can, of course, avoid by running a system like this is firstly, the eyesore nature of having overhead wires everywhere, the high cost of putting them in, and then any public risk in regards to having live wires like a third rail. That's all gone because all the tram is doing is running on the tracks and then charging when it gets to the stops. As far as I see it, I don't think you would need to put in the full length of the route immediately. I think one day you could run this from Te Puna to Te Puke. It wouldn't be a problem. But to begin with, the proposed route, which is on page 7 here, would just run between central Tauranga and then out to Mount Maunganui. So it would run from the Strand via Bay Park, via the Bay Fair Shopping Centre, close to the airport, and then to downtown Mount Maunganui. Now, these trams can go as fast as 80 kilometres per hour. That's not what I'm proposing at all. This is set out around them travelling about 50 kilometres an hour. And in doing so, it would cover that distance around those 6 proposed stops in about 20 minutes, including the stops. So what I'm proposing is a feasibility study to go out and find out if there are any other unknowns that could get in the way of implementing this sort of a project. Things like checking the tracks, seeing what kind of good deal we could get in terms of rolling stock, any potential land acquisition that might be required in terms of putting stops in place, but mostly safety and signalling in regards to any areas where the tracks might meet the roads. But I think the outcomes are pretty obvious. It would be fast, reliable transport. Public transport use increases massively when it's predictable. Trams are much more popular than buses. We've seen that time and again in various other centres around the world. In fact, most modern installations of trams have been incredibly successful. Birmingham runs a very similar system to what they have in Newcastle, and of course ridership is way up. The easing of congestion, which of course is a huge one for Tauranga. More people on public transport means less cars on the road, improving travel for users and motorists, and there'll be no delays from road sharing because of course buses share the road with cars, which means if the cars get jacked up, so do the buses. Whereas because this is using its own separate corridor, hopefully the trams would always run on time. And it is the most environmentally responsible option. Trams carry a large number of people and bicycles, entirely electrified, no tailpipe emissions, the hallmark of a modern transportation solution. These trams can be purchased with 2 modules up to 9 modules. So if it was a success, you could always buy bigger trams and run more people along those same corridors. The only thing you would need to do is expand the stops. So lots of opportunity there to expand the size and scope as Tauranga grows. Lastly, on page 10, just looking at how it aligns with the RLTP, which is, of course, support for sustainable regional growth and lift economic prosperity, enabling areas for new housing, because these trams can travel quite quickly. It might be that around town, this only does 20 kilometres an hour, but out to Papamoa, it could do 80 kilometres an hour. So people could get into work very quickly. Transitioning towards a more sustainable transport system while minimizing environmental impacts, enhancing availability for accessible, affordable, and efficient travel choices for people, building resilience in the transport system by strengthening essential connections and providing alternative routes. I think alternative routes is one of the key elements of this proposal. And then reducing road deaths and serious injuries by taking cars off the roads, pedestrians out of harm's way, and allowing cyclists to take their bikes on the trams, which interestingly is very common overseas, but not something we see a lot of in New Zealand. So I would be encouraging Tauranga to make sure there was that accessibility factor, that people could take their bikes, their surfboards, their dogs, whatever they wanted to on these trams. Anyway, thank you for your time, and I open the floor to any questions.
It's a brilliant presentation and incredibly positive, and there's a lot of heads nodding around the table. Jeremy, are you in a position to share with us your background? Have you got an engineering background, or do you just have a passion for trams and trains?
I do have a passion for trams and trains, that's true. No, my background is in project management, and that's across many industries, mostly the film and TV industry, which has a big logistics component to it. So I've worked all around the world, the Middle East, America, UK, Europe, And yeah, currently back in New Zealand.
No, thank you for sharing that with us. It came through very clearly. Is Worship Mayor Luca and then David from NZTA. Mayor Luca.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jeremy. It's pretty good. I almost ended up doing research on supercapacitors, so it looks good that they're being used for something. It makes perfect sense. It's the way we should be thinking. The track already exists that you're proposing. We have to do any track work really, but what about electrical infrastructure? This thing's got to charge in 10 seconds. It's going to require a lot of power over a short period of time. That's going to probably require some upgrades to this system, is it not? Or the round trip route is 45 kilometres. The track's going to do about 10 stops. So electrical infrastructure.
Yeah, so the proposal that I've put in front of you is for 6 stops, not 10. But yeah, you would need to upgrade some of the stops, not necessarily all of the stops, with the ability to supercharge the trams. But it's very similar to my understanding of it is it's very, very similar. The technology that you have on the tram would be very similar to what you have at the stop, which means that you could put battery infrastructure and supercapacitor infrastructure at the stop for it to load or preload for then the exchange to happen with the tram.
So these trams do have a battery as well as supercapacitors, right?
That's correct. So when you order the tram and you do the layout with the whoever you choose to go with, CAF, Simons, Hitachi, they can rig out the trams, both the interior and the exterior. So you can choose that mix of supercapacitors and batteries based on how long you may want that tram to run. So for example, if you were running it around town, you could probably do it entirely on supercapacitors. If you were running it all the way out to Te Puke, well, then you'd probably want a battery mix. But certainly absolutely capable of doing that. The longest range for battery trams at the moment is about 70 kilometers. So it could easily get to Te Puke and back on a single charge.
And just one final question. Is this the track that's got to be shared with the diesel locomotives carrying logs, or is it a
yes, absolutely.
Track? Oh, okay.
So that would have to be an element that went into the case study, where you looked at how you could manage that. And yeah, there might be times of day where the track is closed off to the tram, but that's not unusual. The same thing happens in the UK and around Europe.
It should be workable, I suppose. Yeah. No, thanks for your presentation. Really good thinking, and it's the sort of thinking we need to do more of. Thanks.
David, NZTA. David, just explain your role and position to Jeremy, just so he knows who's firing the question at him.
Kia ora, Jeremy. I'm David Spears. I'm the Regional Relationships Director for Waka Kotahi for Waikato and Bay of Plenty. Hey, congratulations on a really coherent presentation. Mayor Luca yesterday stole my thunder on a question, and he's done it again today, because my question for you really was, have you thought or done any modelling around the interaction with existing use of the freight system? I know one of the big challenges Te Huia has experienced, although ironically the reverse challenge, is as a slow to stop and slow to start diesel moving into a system that's predominantly dominated by fast to start and stop electric trains in the Auckland network. I know those two don't always go well together, but you've sort of answered the question when Mayor Luca raised it anyway. So yeah, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that we've seen around the world is wherever the tracks meet the road, there's been a lot of underpass and overpass work done. So that's probably an area that NZTA could look into if we were to go forward with a feasibility study.
Yeah, it might comfort you to know that we have a joint program with Kiwi Rail looking at all of those road rail interactions across the country. Would that there would be more money available to do something about it, but we are progressing slowly starting from the most dangerous and working our way down.
Yeah. This is one of the elements that I think is the most important in regards to what Tauranga can do here, is that it's simply in such a unique position in regards to where the railway tracks already exist. So if this were a case in another city or possibly another country, they would have bitten your hand off to have this opportunity. So I do hope that that this is taken seriously and that this is looked at as an opportunity, and that a feasibility study could go ahead to see if this was something we could bring to fruition, because I'm sure if Tauranga did it, there would be other centres in New Zealand which would copy you.
Any further questions or points of clarification to Jeremy from members of the panel? His worship, Mayor Luca.
No, I'm just giving him the.
Oh, the thumbs up. You're getting the thumbs up, Jeremy, from the Mayor.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
You got a vote there. So, Commissioner Selwood, any comments from you as you sort of
No, very
take
interesting
the last
comment.
train out of town?
Very interesting concept. Thank you for presenting it to us. I do recall a similar initiative in Auckland when I was based up there, and the issues around compatibility with the existing diesel freight network were the primary showstoppers. That was not what you were proposing, the supercharged kind of concept. It was a traditional light rail kind of model. So I suspect, those are issues that would need to be explored in any feasibility study, which has already been canvassed in the conversation. I appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy, for taking the time to put in a submission. It was incredibly positive, and there's a lot of heads nodding around the panel. So thank you and have a good day.
Thank you very much. I'll always be available for you to contact me again if you have any further questions.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Cheers.
Now we are having to adjourn for another. Yeah. Leave all the live stream on. Yeah, we're going to leave the live stream on, everybody. We're just waiting for our final presenters who are committed to another meeting at this point in time and are on their way. Oh, they might have just arrived. This is the last one. This is the Rotorua Chamber of Commerce and Rotorua NZ, which is their business development agency, economic development agency. Andrew and Bryce, hello. Good to see you. Different corridor. So, Commissioner, you and I are operating off page 142 and 297, and the other members of the panel are operating off page 169 and page 324. So, gents, you're doing a joint submission today. This is live streamed, it's public. You need to be aware, we had a presentation earlier this morning from Her Worship the Mayor, who zoomed in from Japan. And we also had Stavros Michael with us. They went through their presentation, and I'm sure Kane and O'Brien will share with you some of the content of it at a later stage. They highlighted their 5 priorities. There are a number of issues around the 5 priorities where they lock into the process, but that's a matter that's being addressed as we speak. So, floor is essentially yours. Because of your status and the importance of the issues surrounding RLC at the moment, we're going to dispense a little bit with standing orders, so you got a free run. Take as long as you like. So we normally pin you to about 10 or 20 minutes, but if you want to take a little bit longer, it's more important that we hear what you've got to say. So,
all right, thank you, Councillor Thurston. Look, we'll rip into it. We haven't prepared a presentation. We'll obviously take our submission as being obviously read. There are a couple of things that probably will just speak more in support of, I think, of the Rotorua Lakes Council submission that obviously they made earlier today. One of the things I thought was a little bit helpful was to kind of go back in time a little bit. So around about sort of back in 2016, there was quite an extensive piece of work done around a project called Connect Rotorua. It was predominantly around, the revocation of the REA route, and at that time, obviously, you know, in exchange for revoking the that kind of eastern arterial route, you know, there was I guess a gut feel there was a commitment made towards making some other network improvements right around the lake. And so I think within that context, our submission kind of stands that we continue to understand that you know, the projects that were identified through Connect Rotorua continue to be the ones that we think are the right projects for progressing forward in terms of you know, the future land transport plan. In our submission, we obviously touched on a few points in terms of just, you know, trying to make sure that there is a little bit more of a equitable kind of distribution of resources across the region, particularly when we kind of look at the number of projects and the investment. I'm not going to labour those points. We would say that, you know, despite obviously some concerns that the population, you know, has stagnated here in Rotorua, we would actually argue that you know, it is actually increasing, and you know, particularly over the last few years, it has continued to start to uptick at a reasonable rate. Alongside that, obviously, we've got, you know, strong kind of tourism numbers. So, you know, on any day, there could be in excess of 10,000 extra people within the district. And obviously through peak times, we might be up near sort of 30 or 40,000. You know, all of those you know, are contributors that sometimes get a little bit lost in terms of just looking at the population data overall. Probably similar to the council submission, you know, that we've probably tried to narrow it down into a few really kind of key projects. Obviously, you know, the top of the list for us, and you know, the two projects that you know that we've obviously continue to advocate for, which we think strongly align to the you know, how do we continue to unlock economic activity and grow the economy, but also unlock housing. You know, other projects around obviously out at Peka and the Waipara Valley, which we know that obviously some, you know, quite a bit of investigation work has already been completed on, and then obviously out at Eastgate when we're kind of looking at the airport. Those are obviously critically important. Beyond that, when we talk about revocation work for Amahal Street in the middle of the city, we'd also stress there's a couple of other things that need to kind of sit alongside that. One of them is the relationship back into our inner city, and thinking about how that inner city precinct gets revitalised. Obviously, the revocation has a role to play in terms of considering how all that work's integrated. But we'd also say that revoking that state highway means that we need to make sure that, you know, the movement of trucks and freight, you know, is eased around the, I guess what you could almost call our quasi ring route, you know, and along El Taupo Road and Sala Street, and making sure that those two corridors are actually fit for purpose in terms of transportation there. The final project, which I know, again, you know, is very much about dealing with some of that kind of increased population growth, particularly when we look at Mangataha Way, is that kind of four laning of, you know, from the end of where it finishes at the end of Ferry Springs Road through to the roundabout there. Again, is another one that helps to just ease some of those kind of peak time traffic concerns, and helps to unlock some additional housing options out of Mangataha. I might pause there, Councillor.
Well, you'll be delighted to know that your 5 priorities exactly align with what we got told this morning by who worship the mayor of Japan and Stavros. So
good to be in
you're
alignment.
obviously in total sync with one another. So exactly. So your 1 to 5 replicate there. So Bryce, any comments? Anything you'd like to say in support of that?
The chamber in turn speaks for about 90% of the business of Rotorua as measured by employment. Because all of these people pretty much are members of the chamber, and we're vitally concerned in the chamber about the economic situation in Rotorua and the state of the CBD and the image that we've got, reputational damage. And we see the land transport plan as one way in which we can start to address some of the issues that are top of mind for us. So to add to the cause of unity, all 5 projects are ones that we support and endorse. We're working very hard to try and do some reputational damage repair together with the council and Rotary NZ. And things like the main entranceways into the city are very important to us in all aspects of them. And I travel in personally every day from Amarana and get caught up in the problem that yesterday I stopped at Waititi Bridge, dead stop, 45 minutes from Amarana to CBD. no course, no accidents, just congestion. And the issue is that the roundabout has solved the one problem and pushed it down to where the 4 lanes don't exist. And those are typical of the problems we're getting. You resolve one, the next one comes along. So all 5 of those projects are important to us, and we support the submission of Rotary NZ 100%.
Can I just say all 3 Rotorua-based councils came to hear your presentation today, so we put huge weight on it, and what you've just said, Bryce, to me is like music to my ears, and I'm not allowed to say that, but I'm going to say it. Can I just focus on their first priority was the Waipara intersection, Red Stag and the Peka block. You've done quite a substantial presentation with regard to the Peka block. Do you want to just enlighten us?
Look, there's obviously been a piece of work that I know NZTA have been involved as well, and that between council and Rotary NZ, we partially funded to get Stantec to do some design thinking, there's some work there. So, you know, we think largely a lot of the strategic business cases has been kind of completed. The Peka development is full steam ahead. So certainly if you drive down there, there's plenty of earth being moved at the moment. They're reporting really good uptake in terms of their first couple of stages in terms of tenancies. Over the other side of the valley in terms of Waipara, you know, we've already got the biggest mill in the southern hemisphere. They've got, you know, ambitions to continue growing. They are very committed to that. And so, you know, we see that as been alongside obviously all of the, the recreational access into the forest down there. That's a very busy, set of intersections with which I think, most of locals will probably acknowledge it's a miracle we haven't seen some more accidents down there in terms of, trucks and people on bikes and cars all mixing at quite high speeds. That's certainly something that we think is really critical to be able to unlock those future stages of the Peka development. We should add at this stage, realistically, that is our industrial zone land, so if we look around our district, that is the one kind of core block that is actually zoned heavy industrial currently. There's around about 100 hectares down there. I think the first stage is unlock around about 20. To unlock those future stages is going to require some work down there. I know obviously the developers down there are realistic. They're going to have to contribute to the cost of that infrastructure, but making sure that it's actually flagged in this LTP cycle is obviously really important.
Questions from members of the panel? Is Worship Mayor Luca?
I don't know if you know, maybe you can answer, but Red Stag looks to me like something that's, I asked myself what we've been doing in the last 40 years or whatever. They're employing 400 at the moment, is it? And what does the future look like? That employment is going to...
Yeah, look, that will continue to increase. So, and Bryce, who's obviously worked in the forestry sector for quite a long time, probably has some thoughts on this. But we've been through the kind of the heavy automation and so forth in that kind of forestry sector. These are really high value jobs. They're an exemplar company in terms of the types of investments they're making. They're exactly the type of jobs that we'll be attracting in terms of high value machinists and robotics and
Red Stag is the one world scale mill that we've got, processing mill in New Zealand, and therefore it can compete on the international market. And so it's really an exemplar for how we need to think if we're going to get all these raw products that we're exporting to China and elsewhere processed in New Zealand. They can do it competitively. And they've introduced new technology, as Andrew was saying, and one of the things they've done, which is really a huge step forward, is introduced this new cross-laminated CLT plant. That's making a product that's in massive and growing demand throughout the world because it leads to engineered products that in turn lead to highways building made out of wood. So they've done everything right. They continue to grow, and I think they're currently around about 450, 480 employees from memory, and extrapolations forward are more high quality jobs. Forestry, of course, is one of the 3 cornerstones of the Rotorua economy. It feeds into the big engineering stuff that we have here in Chile. So
No, I think that the engineered lumber thing has got huge potential, and
Yeah.
we really should be trying to value add, but we seem to go
Yeah.
take the easy pickings but I don't know what the value add is on engineered lumber versus just shipping out logs, but it must be quite
Oh,
substantial.
massive. Yeah, very substantial. Yeah.
So hopefully.
And it's not market constrained.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the good news is, and I hope the Red Stag guys wouldn't mind me saying this, you know, that their order book for that CLT plant is you wouldn't get anything this year. You know, so you're out into later in 25 if you wanted to get a project out of it. So, you know, it is definitely humming. They're definitely considering how they continue to expand. Yeah.
Are they getting any government support on that, considering the scope that it has?
No, that's a you know, commercially oriented business. So, yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Selwood?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to acknowledge the submission and thank you for bringing it forward. It appears our process may well have let us down in terms of making sure that the Rotorua projects were suitably considered via the evaluation process that they went through, and I'm sure that we'll be able to fix that and they can be adequately and rightfully considered in our deliberations. I just wanted to note too that you may be aware that we have a new TCC administration building going up in Devonport Road in Tauranga, which is, I think it's 7, maybe 6 floors of cross-laminated timber from Red Stag, and will enable us to deliver a Green Star 6 building. It's been an incredible development, and it's great to see industry of that quality and calibre from Rotorua, from New Zealand, that have global impact. So certainly recognise the significance of that piece of industrial or commercial development. Thanks, guys.
So we haven't got a time constraint on you. So is there anything else you wanted to share with us while you're here?
So first thing, I've just come from a board meeting of the Rotorua Chamber Board. We meet monthly. Happened to have a meeting this morning by coincidence. And right at the top of our agenda was this issue of today's submission. There's a lengthy discussion about the process that's used to arrive at a conclusion. And I'll explain what you explained to us here last week about the process and how it works. And the concern, of course, stemmed from the fact that we're paying our share on property values and head count, etc., of the rate, which is around 20%. But we're not in all facets of our business do we seem to be getting 20% share of the activity, understanding that this is funded through the national fund rather than the regional one. So the problem that we were trying to find a solution to, and I'm sure everyone is how do we ensure that we don't end up as draining wealth out of Rotorua through the rating system and not getting our fair share of the benefit. That was the discussion. But the process that we're running with this does kind of lead itself to that outcome. We have an answer.
No, well, take on board the comments. You have the comments? Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And unrelated to this hearing, we 3 councillors have had a discussion and we're looking at setting up a sort of quarterly meeting with you two and RLC or whoever you think should be included. So we're working on all your requests. So no, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work that you're doing. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. So I'm going to move that we adjourn this meeting and stop the live streaming. But if those up there on the screens could just be on standby. So we're in your hands, Amanda. Oh, and to announce that we are also adjourning this meeting, and I invite you all together tomorrow in Whakatane for the last day of the hearings. So you're about to disconnect the live stream.